If you're watching this video, it means that you survived the recession of 2023, the recession that never actually happened. But why didn't it happen, and what are the odds of a recession happening in 2024? And if so, what should you be doing with your money right now? Let's go ahead and break it down. Now, there are people who predict recessions literally every year, but 2023 was different. It was a mass of people, banks, economists, random people on the street who predicted that there was going to be a recession in 2023, and I would say probably rooted for a recession, but it did not happen. So what were the factors that prevented us from going into a recession, and are they going to still exist in 2024? And if not, like, what are the odds that we could be running into one? Well, I did some research and pulled together, I would think, four major things that occurred that prevented us from going into recession. I think they could extend into 2024. But what were those things? The first one is this. Anytime that you are putting together a prediction, an informed prediction, you are going to use previous data and previous information. So for example, one of the things we talked about on this channel, as well as historians and economists and everyone else, we talk about the 1970s and 1980s when we had high inflation, which we did see. And what did the Fed do? They increased interest rates, and they did so quickly. When that happened in the 1970s and 80s, the economy crashed. That was the symptom of doing so, because you raised borrowing costs, spending slowed down, economy slowed down enough that you ran into a recession. Well, we had high inflation, you had the Fed cranking up interest rates. That is a normal prediction for people to say, look, it happened last time, you're doing the exact same thing, this seems to be a pattern. The problem was this. We saw a $5 trillion stimulus package that was passed during the COVID era, and a lot of that money is still around. And because we had such a large stimulus package, guess what? That was something that was unprecedented. It is very difficult to predict something that has almost never occurred or hasn't occurred in a similar fashion. This is larger than what we saw during the Great Recession and larger than what we've seen probably at any point in history. And once you get that black swan event, once you get something that is unprecedented, it is hard to predict what is going to happen next. And that has really set the stage for where we are right now, but especially what happened in 2023. So part of that COVID package, as well as some of the other packages that were passed during that time, was the fact that during COVID, as we all know, there was people not spending money, right? Which meant that we were saving. We had a record amount of savings. We've talked about that before. And the first thing is, people have predicted that that amount of savings was going to run out at some point in 2023. Those have been revised. And now economists and bankers are thinking that's not going to run out until the end of 2024. So people still have some form of that money still sitting around. When you think about it, I always kind of put it in the context of myself, because for me, right, for 3 years, no student loans. For 2 years, no daycare. For 2 to 2.5 years, no vacation. Just daycare by itself, that's a whole lot of money that I was just sitting on, right? And most people were sitting on in some way or another. Even if you don't have kids and you don't have student loans, if you weren't going to and from work, that was one thing that you were saving, right? You weren't paying gas and commuting back and forth. So all of those things, for some people, that is why we built up, right, that huge amount of savings, which one did contribute to inflation, because you could outbid for things. People were home, bored, buying stuff on Etsy and buying stuff on Amazon just out of boredom. So it did contribute to inflation. But in a time like now, in 2024, but also in 2023, well, some of that money was still sitting around. And remember, 2/3 of our economy is based on what? Consumer spending. Spending did not fall off in 2023. And we had talked about in September and October where we expected retail spending to fall off just a bit. I didn't really think that Black Friday was going to be a record amount of spending, but it was. And that is a part of why you're never going to see a recession in a year where you see record spending from consumers. Those two things do not match. Our economy runs on primarily middle-class people, normal people buying stuff, right? Groceries, goods, services, and everything in between. And that did not slow down in 2023, which I think is a good thing, okay? But another part of that is one of the reasons why it didn't slow down is, yes, some people still have a decent amount of that savings that they've saved up over the previous 3 years, but also unemployment was at a record low. We didn't really see any major layoffs that impacted the economy in the way that most people saw. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what happened to the massive layoffs at Amazon and Google and Meta a year, almost 2 years ago? That did happen, but remember, the tech sector doesn't even make up 5% of the entire workforce. They are extremely powerful companies, usually great stocks, but they don't employ a significant amount of people like manufacturing or education or military or something like that. That's just not the case, right? It may make up a ton in a city like San Francisco, but in between the coast, hey, it's not the engine of the majority of the economy in the way that most people think. So that's another part of it. Unemployment was low. People still had savings. You had a major stimulus package that people had not seen before. But then you run into this part of it, which I think is perhaps the most interesting. Interest rates, right? You get notifications, and you may see on the news, hey, interest rates for mortgages are 2 or 3 times what they were during COVID. It's at a 20 or 30-year high, and people are not wanting to buy homes, so on and so forth. The thing about interest rates is this. The people who bought, as well as the businesses that took advantage of those rates, you're pretty much locked in, which means that you are insulated from wherever interest rates go from here on out. So for example, for me, I got a mortgage. My mortgage is right under 3%, 2.9 something, okay? So when the Fed raises interest rates or mortgage rates go to 7%, 8%, 9%, does that impact me at all? No. I got the mortgage that I got. And that's the thing. Once you are locked in, it's not really going to impact you from that point forward. If someone who has a used car, if you got a used car and your interest rate was low, it doesn't really matter what they raise rates to, right? Or if you pay for your car in cash, it don't matter what they do in terms of rate. And that is the thing that has helped us not run into recession, unlike some of those other eras where people who were not locked into certain prices, or like the Great Recession, you had something that was a variable rate mortgage where you had something at 3%, market changes, and now it's at 10%. And now you are paying 5 or 6 times what your mortgage was. Well, that's not the case in this era for most people. And that is the reason why we didn't really run into a recession in 2023. And according to some, we might not run into one for 24. So when you talk to, or when you start to survey different results from different bankers meaning like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and things like that, or even the New York Fed, they say that it is a 51.8% chance of a recession in 2024, which is basically a coin flip. I will say that I don't really see anything at this point in time, though it is early. It is as early as it can get. So I don't really see anything now, but I also don't have a crystal ball. I will say, though, that there is always a black swan event that can really throw everything off. I pray to God it's not going to be another pandemic. Please, not that, right? But there could be something like that, which hopefully we don't see. We do know there's a presidential election. We do know some international conflicts. Hopefully those don't expand either. So there can always be something that blows up everything and really throws everyone off. But right now, inflation is coming down. Unemployment is low. People are still spending. We should be fine. If those projections are correct in terms of the whole spending arc, meaning we're not going to run out of savings in 2024, we should still be fine, right? And then we'll see what's going to happen in 2025. So we'll see, but it doesn't really line up for a recession. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can't be concerned about, or that everything's perfect, or that you even feel rich. And that's an entirely different video and topic, because feeling rich and feeling prosperous in a time like this, the opposite of that doesn't mean recession, okay? So there's a different conversation there. But I will say this. If you are somebody like me who wants to stay prepared no matter what, you need to make sure that you have your money together. So if you're looking to protect your money this year and at all times, this is the video that you want to watch next.